Hi everybody, let's get started. There is overflow kind of on the floors here, so feel free. Sorry for discomfort. I'm Jeremy. I'm the director of the Honors Program here at SVA, and I'm so pleased to welcome you here. This is the second lecture this semester of the Art and Politics lecture series. The main purpose of the Art and Politics lecture series is to touch, co-sponsored with the BFA Visual and Critical Studies program, is to touch on the ties that bind art and politics today in light of the contemporary crises facing humanity: climate crisis, crisis of rising authoritarianism, crises of economic misère, and so much more. And also what divide art and politics, the many ways in which they touch each other and fail to touch one another at their deepest points. That's the mission of the series. This is our second lecture in the semester. We have two more coming up once a month. March the 31st, David France, director of How to Survive a Plague, is going to come speak about ACT UP activism. And April the 22nd, Anne Anlin Chang, the psychoanalyst and Princeton literature professor, is going to come speak about a talk with a provocative title, Women on Walls. That I won't say much more about. But tonight, I am so pleased to welcome all of you and to welcome our guest speaker. I will be brief in introducing her and then kick us off. Oh, I will also send around a sign-up sheet if you can sign up. This is especially for the students, but not only for the students. So, and there's a brochure up here with the rest of the lecture information you're welcome to get on your way out. Tonight, our guest lecturer, I'm so pleased to introduce, is professor at the University of Chicago, Malynne Sternstein. Well, first I'll read the official bio.
Do you know how hard it is to say my name? And you said it perfectly.
There's good reason for that, but I'll come to it. She's a professor in Slavic languages and literatures and the chair of the Fundamentals, Issues, and Texts program at the University of Chicago. Her interests include Czech, Russian, and Central European studies, the European avant-garde, semiotic theory, performance theory, gender and sexuality, aesthetic theory, and kitsch and narratology. She's the author of Against Arbitrariness, the Czech avant-garde and the subversion of the symbolic sign, and Toyen, Gender, Obscurity, and the Fires of Surrealism. She's been nominated for many awards and excellence in teaching at the undergraduate and graduate level, and I can speak on a personal level to that. So part of what generated this talk, besides the kind of urgency of thinking about anti-fascist art and politics in the present, which Malynne will talk more about, is also 3 years ago at the Honors Accepted Students Day, a student and her mother approached me and were like, oh, there's this title of a course in the honors class. Did you happen to go to the University of Chicago? And I was like, yes, I went to the University of Chicago. And we were all wearing masks in those days. And she was like, oh, my daughter's, and we're like, oh, talk about Hyde Park. And she was like, my daughter Smila goes to the University of Chicago, goes to SVA, is coming to SVA. And I was like, oh, are you Malynne Sternstein? And she was like, yes. And I was like, you were my professor when you were pregnant with your daughter, Smila. And taught a course on the Czech avant-garde novelist, Bohumil Hrabal, which I remember, a great author and wonderful class. So it's kind of a full circle moment for me as well. If we think about, so much of Benjamin's work is about kind of discontinuity and the sharp break that the kind of late capitalism represents with the whole of human civilization. But we still do have, we odd humans have these things called generations. And there's a sort of generational baton with Malynne to myself to her daughter, which is kind of a nice thing in the midst of the chaos of the present to see. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Malynne Sternstein.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jeremy, so much. I was worried you were going to tell the story differently than I remember it, but you said it exactly. That's exactly what happened. It was like, Malynne? And thank you, everyone, for showing up. I know that I'm a punishment for a lot of the honors students because you would be demerited if you didn't come to this talk. But not really, it's Jeremy. But I hope that I say something that sparks an interest at the very least. So, over 30 years after Walter Benjamin's death, and this is, I don't know if any of you have been there, but this is the monument to Benjamin on the Spanish border. It's very striking. Have you? So, over 30 years after Benjamin's death, and almost 50 years since the artist who would be called Surrealist formally galvanized as a movement, with Louis Aragon having turned to socialist realism, and Salvador Dali still very much alive and literally kicking, the Rothschilds, stinking with money and time on their hands, threw a surrealist ball. On the evening of December 12, 1972, and deep into the night, the ball, hosted by Baroness Marie-Hélène de Rothschild, there, and her husband Guy, usually it's the husband and his wife, she's the one with the money, at one of their several opulent homes, the Château de Ferrières, just outside Paris, movie stars, financiers, artists, and the obscenely wealthy gathered together to dine off of nude mannequins and reportedly naked ladies, and waited to be served by meowing staff dressed as cats, and hobnobbed with one another in palatial surrounds. It is no wonder that this same ball has generated a host of conspiracy theories, the most alluring being that it was a thinly veiled chance for the Illuminati to enjoy a Black Sabbath replete with human sacrifice and orgies. I know how interesting that talk would be, but sadly I am here to discuss the mutual constitution of art and politics and the potential for art to be a permanent revolutionary force. One would be hard-pressed to maintain that the Rothschilds' surrealist ball was an encounter with the energies of revolution. This ball, the invitation to which requires black tie and long dresses, and is titled Surrealist Heads, Dîner de tête surréaliste, instead shows how easily art, in this case surrealism, an art movement most usually associated with leftist agitation, is systematized, typologized, and diffused of these energies. When one can ask for surrealist heads, the revolutionary potential of surrealism has surely been guillotined. The same might be said of camp and kitsch. Just some images from the ball. I dare not say that Audrey Hepburn was part of this process of diffusing the politicization of art, especially because my kid really likes Audrey Hepburn, but sorry, there she was with her birdcage hat. One would be hard-pressed to maintain that the Rothschild Surrealist Ball was this encounter with the energies of revolution, but the same might be said also of camp. That sensibility that Susan Sontag so famously reserved the rights over for the queer, pariah intelligentsia and their forebears. According to Sontag, camp sees everything in quotation marks. It's not a lamp, but a lamp. It's not a woman, but a woman. The hallmark of camp is the spirit of extravagance. Camp is a woman walking around in a dress made of 3 million feathers. Camp is the paintings of Carlo Crivelli, with their real jewels and trompe-l'oeil insects and cracks in the masonry. In camp, there is often something démesuré on the quality of ambition, not only in the style of the work itself. To perceive camp in objects and in persons is to understand, according to Sontag, being as playing a role. When something is just bad rather than camp, it's often because it's too mediocre in its ambition. The artist hasn't attempted to do anything really outlandish. There is much to be critiqued in the 2019 Met Gala's translation of camp. and the very possibility of camp being something that can be formalized as a demand, just as with surrealism in the case of the Rothschilds' ball. And that there may be various interpretations and senses of what constitutes surrealism, just as there are with camp. At the Met Gala, for example, the fact that it can be invoked at all as an aegis or a cover term tells us that these notions have been taken out of flux, a space where folds are generative and valuable, and they've been plonked instead into a closed system. That is to say, it is not important whether or not we all have sameness in meaning, to borrow a phrase from Ferdinand de Saussure, but that the term uttered is approaching absolute meaning in terms of a classification. One of Benjamin's earliest encounters with surrealism is contained in his pithy work of 1925, published in 1927, Traum Kitsch. I don't expect you all to know German, don't worry about it. Or in the English translation, Dream Kitsch, a gloss on surrealism. The essay begins this way. I'm not going to read that for you, so don't worry. I might assault you with some German later, though. It is difficult nowadays to dream of the blue flower. Anyone who awakes as Heinrich von Ofterdingen today must have overslept. The history of the dream still remains to be written. Gaining an insight into the history of the dream would mean using historical illumination to decisively defeat a superstition that believes that dreams solely have their origin in nature. Dreaming is part of history. A statistics on dreams would cross the boundary that confines us to the sweetness of the anecdotal landscape and push forward into the barren landscape of a battlefield. Dreams have ordered wars to start, and from time immemorial, wars have decreed the rights and wrongs of dreams and their very boundaries. Benjamin mobilizes here the figure of Heinrich von Ofterdingen. I don't need to tell you who that is, right? The legendary troubadour mentioned in the epic of the Sängerkrieg in the 14th century, resurrected by German Romantic poet Novalis in 1800, and then again by E.T.A. Hoffmann not long after, as a gesture toward how Romanticism, cannily and fetishistically, is capable of mythologizing things and stealing their faces altogether. Benjamin goes on to explain, dreams no longer provide a view on blue horizons, that is, the romantical horizons. Dreams have become gray. Remember, this is the mid-20s. Not right, it is right now too, but I'm not from this century. A gray layer of dust on things is dreams' highest faculty today. Dreams now lead straight into banality. Technology is in the process of canceling the exterior appearance of things, never to be seen again, in the same way as banknotes scheduled for invalidation are canceled. In a final farewell, our hand grasps the exterior appearance of things in dreaming and runs its fingers over their familiar shape. It touches the things where they are most worn. This is not always the best place to touch things, however. Children do not clasp a glass, right, like this. They grab it by putting their fingers in it. And which side does a thing present to dream? What is this most worn place? It is the side that has been worn thin by habit and is garnished with cheap maxims. The side that things present to dreams is kitsch. Landing with a smack, the fantasy image of things fall towards the ground like pages of an accordion fold picture book. At the bottom each page contains a maxim. Right? There's a maxim such as, "My most beautiful mistress is laziness," or "a gold medal for the greatest boredom," or "in the hall there is someone who has it in for me." The Surrealists composed such lines, and the friends of these artists went on to reproduce such figures of speech in picture books. In these lines, Benjamin's outlook on surrealism appears at least ambivalent, if not overall circumspect. Such maxims, from what we learn elsewhere in Benjamin's work, seem prepared for embroidery onto poofy cushions decorating the haute bourgeois home. He continues by pointing specifically to this frontispiece by Max Ernst that graces Paul Eluard's poetry collection of 1922. Benjamin described the image in this way. The four small boys have their backs turned to the teacher, to their teacher, and to their teacher's desk, and are looking out over a balustrade to where a balloon is hovering in midair. A huge pencil balances on the balustrade, standing on its point. The repetition of childhood experience gives us pause for thought. When we were little, the disturbing and constricting protest against the world of our parents did not yet exist. Being children in the midst of our parents' world, we proved to be superior. Together with the banal, in the event that we embrace it, we will also be embracing the good, which, behold, doth lie so near. For the sentimentality of our parents, repeatedly distilled, is exactly what it takes to provide the most objective image of our feelings. Bitter as gall, the long-windedness of their speech contracts to form a muddled picture puzzle in our minds. The ornament, you know that's a bad word, the ornament of their conversation become full of innermost entanglements. Therein lies deep affection, love, kitsch. For many, even the most sanguine of his scholars, Benjamin is recondite. What I see here, and I'm taking a risk, is a narrative of kitsch as inheritance. We are not born, but we become kitsch. The banal is the good we are taught to embrace, the economy of love into which we are initiated with education, familial, intersocial, interpersonal, institutional, is love kitsch. We are given an M dash in the English translation, but there is none in the original German. Therein lies deep affection, comma, love, comma, kitsch. In the original, then, is an enumeration and not an exact equivocation or a definitional exposition. A series, then. These are what are furnished. This is what we are furnished with as we mature. But I argue this love is not the love without hope of this talk's title. Instead, this kitschy, affectionate love in the conventional sense, and in the most common usage, is a love with hope. A hope, and hope is perhaps one of the kitschiest instantiations available to humankind. But we will turn to that later. How can kitsch, though, be so perfidious? Isn't kitsch a harmless bit of bad taste? No. Kitsch is, especially in Europe in the first third of the 20th century, and dare I say right now, the companion of, or perhaps even the prerequisite to nothing less than fascism. And it may be here again now in 2025, or more likely it has never truly left the farcical stage of history. Benjamin appears to give some credit to surrealism, though, for seeing into the prurient side of kitsch, out of the totemic tree of objects that lies in the thicket of prehistory. I'm quoting, "On this totemic tree, the topmost, the ultimate hideous face is kitsch. Kitsch is the last mask of the banal with which we attire ourselves in dreams and conversation in order to absorb into ourselves the power of the world, of those things that have died out," end quote. However, we are caught up in the vagaries of translation once again, which is my way of asking you all to learn a non-Anglophone language. It's the U of C in me. There is much that can bemuse us here with this notion of a totemic tree in this primeval forest. What must be underscored, however, is more German, is the special value Benjamin assigns to the terms totem and Spur, totem and Spur, totem and trail or trace, respectively. In using the word totem, Benjamin is invoking Freud's Totem and Taboo from 1913, and its usage among intellectuals is a byword for fetish. By using the term Spur, or what's translated usually as trail, but which should be translated as trace, instead of, say, vague, auf dem Weg, right, on the way to, on the path to, Benjamin is calling his reader to attend to the sense of trail as trace, as scent, maybe even as scat, that assists the hunter to finding its prey. This trace, or Spur, is a concept that will dominate one of Benjamin's last, and for me, his most important work, his Arcades project, where it is signal of a dreaminess that must be placed into a dialectical tension and then sloughed off. We can see with the perspective of hindsight a through line in Benjamin's work from the 1920s to 1940, and it should be noted that the Arcades project was begun in the 1920s. That dream, kitsch, and trace are concepts that constellate around surrealism in Benjamin's work, and they also move variously from a tentative approval of surrealism, with caveats for kitsch in place, to a more sober consideration of its accomplishments and failures, which many call a fascination, but I do not, to a grave misgiving as to its propensity to romantic re-mythologizing. And it's at this point that I should probably be honest about why I'm talking about Benjamin and surrealism at all. What is at stake for me? In 2019, I gave a talk at the second symposium organized by the loftily named International Society for the Study of Surrealism, or IS. That year, the venue was the University of Exeter in the UK. I had written a talk on Czech surrealism, and I was thoroughly disillusioned with all of the other talks at the conference. When somebody brought up Walter Benjamin and said that he adored surrealism, I objected. At that point, I was scarred for life. That, and also going to a hotel with the exact same name as the hotel in which I was staying in this rather small town of Exeter. And I went to the wrong hotel. They have 2 hotels named the exact same thing in Exeter. I sat waiting in the one hotel for 3 hours for a minicab to take me on a 3-minute drive to the other hotel by the same name. Book closed. Ever since then, though, I've wondered if I've gotten it all wrong. So, back to my version of Benjamin, who ends his gloss on surrealism with these words. What we used to call art solely begins at a distance of 2 meters from the body. But today, in kitsch, the world of things advances on the human being. The world of things surrenders to people's groping. And then, eventually, it forms its figures within them. The new human contains within himself the very quintessence of the old forms. And through engagement with a social environment dating back to the second half of the 19th century, the rise of the bourgeoisie, in dreams as well as in the words and images of certain artists, a creature is formed that deserves to be called the furnished man. I'll talk about this furnished man as basically equivalent to what others called, around the same time Benjamin was writing in the mid-1920s, the kitsch mensch, or the kitsch human being, the kitsch man. But is it really too outlandish to say, echoing the beginning of this conversation, that as exciting as Surrealism may have been for Benjamin, in it already lurked totemism and trace, fetish and this trace that needs to be sloughed off? Is it too far-fetched to see in the Pope of Surrealism, André Breton, here he is, already in 1929, when Benjamin devoted a lengthy study of the movement under the title Surrealism, the Last Snapshot of the European Intelligentsia, a Furnished Man? And is the kitsch collecting and display of goods not already approaching the ruins of kitsch? Kitsch, of course, does not inhere in the thing. An object can be made as kitsch, but treated otherwise, and vice versa. But above all, kitsch is a matter of attitude. Accumulation is key. Exhibition value is king. And if one is a kitschmensch, then all one touches is kitschified. Benjamin and his contemporaries at the Frankfurt School. Does this look familiar to you? Do you want to guess?
Is that where Trump?
Yeah, yeah. It's a Trump interior. Benjamin and his contemporaries in the Frankfurt School and many other thinkers and artists in the run-up to World War II were terrified, quite rightly, of kitsch, and the kitschmensch par excellence then was Hitler. It is difficult in Benjamin's work to separate bourgeois romanticism from kitsch itself. The dilemma of kitsch, or more precisely bourgeois romanticism, is that, as Benjamin says, it presents the public with the literary precipitate of a certain form of existence while withholding that existence itself. This may remind some of you of claims about the power of dream and fantasy to keep or to fortify and keep the mechanisms of oppression where they are. That is, the more the proletariat or the service class dream about their enchanted domains, the vacations they want to take, winning millions in the lottery, and so on, the less they will be aware of the strictures of their living conditions. Dreams are good for keeping the underclass the underclass. The truth is, too, that Breton became an autocrat who made decisions on who was and who was not part of the Surrealist kingdom. Aragon gave up la Dialectique for socialist realism. Paul Eluard wrote odes to Stalin, and he and Philippe Soupeau turned their back on their friend, Czech surrealist Zawisz Kalandra, allowing him thereby to be put through a show trial and then executed under Soviet authority. What the Rothschild ball and the kitsch reproductions of surrealism, along with other pleasing art style, proves is that surrealism's kitsch mention lend themselves to emblematization. And that is further proof of the facility for swapping a dialectical immanence for the currency of mythic essence. In the words of Austrian writer Hermann Broch, 1886 to 1951, quote, kitsch could not, in fact, either emerge or prosper without the existence of the kitschmensch, the lover of kitsch. As a producer of art, he produces kitsch, and as a consumer of art, is prepared to acquire it and pay quite handsomely for it. In a broad sense, art always reflects the image of contemporary man. And if kitsch represents falsehood, and it often does, this falsehood falls back on the person in need of it, on the person who uses this highly considerate mirror so as to be able to recognize himself in the counterfeit image it throws back at him, and to confess his own lies with a delight which is, to a certain extent, sincere. We get a good sense of what Benjamin considers kitschy when we understand his reference to French poet Rimbaud's early work, Saison en Enfer, Season in Hell, a long self-published poem from 1873, distributed mainly by Rimbaud to his family and friends. Here it is Rimbaud himself who returns to this work with the ultimate judgment. He scribbled in the margins, "This is all trash." Hermann Broch, best known for his massive novel on the decrepitude of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, The Sleepwalkers, which the Honors Library does not have, and so I will send them along, raised the alarm on kitsch in the 1930s with the rise of an installment of Hitler, and returned to it in 1950, a year before his death. These are real. I did not create these. I just put them up there for you. This is, I'm quoting Broch again. "It is not mere chance that Hitler, like his predecessor Wilhelm II, was an enthusiastic disciple of kitsch. He liked the full-bodied type of kitsch and the saccharine type. He found both beautiful. This personal nostalgia for a better and safer world enables us to understand why historical studies and the historical novel are thriving again today." Would again be in the 30s. But it also shows that this is just another way of entering a sphere that already belongs to kitsch's sphere of influence. The romantic need was at one time satisfied by chivalrous novels or novels of adventure, in which the immediate terms of historical reality were replaced by prefabricated cliches. And this is Broch, even today, so he's talking about the 1930s, when there is an escape from reality, he means films, the movies, it always and only represents a search for a world with set conventions, the world of our fathers, in which everything was good and fair, in short, an attempt to establish an immediate liaison with the past. So it's not make America great, it's make America great again. More poignant even than these words is, for me at least, Milan Kundera's novelistic essay, In the Unbearable Lightness of Being, on the relationship between kitsch and shit. Quoting from Kundera, "The fact that until recently the word shit appeared in print as S- has nothing to do with moral considerations. You can't claim that shit is immoral. After all, the objection to shit is a metaphysical one. The daily defecation session is daily proof of the unacceptability of creation. The aesthetic ideal of the categorical agreement with being is a world in which shit is denied and everyone acts as though it did not exist. This aesthetic ideal is called kitsch. Kitsch is the absolute denial of shit in both the literal and the figurative senses of the word. Kitsch excludes everything from its purview which is essentially unacceptable to human existence." I could have showed you my sister's bathroom too. One of her 5. The wealth does not come to me. Kitsch causes, this is Kundera again, kitsch causes 2 tears to flow in quick succession. The first tear says, "How nice to see children running on the grass." The second tear says, "How nice to be moved together with all mankind by children running on the grass." It is the second tier that makes kitsch kitsch. With this shadow of kitsch looming, Benjamin returns to Surrealism in 1929 with the essay Surrealism, the Last Snapshot of the European Intelligentsia, inflected with Benjamin's growing interest in the architectonics of modernity, that which the Arcades Project will thoroughly explore. Scholars like Michael Loewy, who I am picking on today, is he here in the audience? Do see a critique in Benjamin otherwise, right? But otherwise a fascination with the movement. But the things that Loewy tells us are negative assessments of surrealism revolve around the surrealist illuminations. According to Loewy, Benjamin pays particular attention to their discovery, that is the surrealist discovery, of revolutionary energies that appear in the outmoded, in the first iron constructions that he sees in Paris, right, that were seen in Paris, the first factory buildings, the earliest photographs, the objects that have begun to become extinct, like the grand piano. What is the relation of these things to revolution, though? According to Loewy, Benjamin never explains. I think he does. Elsewhere, Loewy says, Benjamin does, however, criticize surrealism for being, quote, enmeshed in a number of pernicious romantic principles and prejudices, and for being, quoting from Benjamin, an inadequate, undialectical conception of the nature of intoxication. What Loewy overlooks, I think, is that this different direction, the one that turns to urban poverty, is, in fact, a critique of the limits of surrealism to speak politically. Indeed, one of the most robust of the concepts Benjamin generates at this time, the idea of profane illumination, is harnessed to consider what it is that surrealism is capable of and what it is not. Had surrealism successfully wrested itself from the primacy of dreams, hallucinations, and theologico-mystical ecstasies, then it would have been able to make effectual inroads to urban poverty, to the proletariat. In Benjamin's words, this profane illumination did not always find the surrealists equal to it, or to themselves, and the very writings that proclaim it most powerfully. Louis Aragon's incomparable Paysan de Paris, Paris Peasant, and Breton's Nadia show very disturbing, according to Benjamin, symptoms of deficiency. To understand the last Snapshot essay from 1929, one must understand that it is emphatically written for a German audience, one in the throes of racist state capture and authoritarianism born of a romantic, totalizing ideology. The urgency of Benjamin's essay about French surrealism, but addressed to Germany, is ignored. It's a snapshot of the European intelligentsia. It is the French leading the way, not the Germans. That is to say that it is not so much that Benjamin found in the French surrealists a certain number of things that had suddenly come to him over the previous years. In other words, he read those periodicals in which Aragon and Breton had published their materials, and they coincided with his own thinking, but that the landscape of French artistic currents in works that would make their way to the Degenerate art exhibit in 1937, which contained mainly Dada and Cubist work, but did include art that may have been diagnosed as surrealist. What he saw there was a potential cure in French artistic movements to the ills assaulting Germanophone Europe. I should add that the artworks put on display in the Degenerate art exhibit were not deemed degenerate because they were kitsch, but because they insulted, I'm quoting, insulted German feeling, destroyed or confused natural form, or simply revealed an absence of adequate manual and artistic skill. here's some kundera for you. I tried to find the kitschiest image for Valentine's Day. In fact, what many of those works in the Degenerate exhibit showcase, and the best work of the Surrealist showcase, is the dialectical image. For me, this is Benjamin's answer. Oh, I thought I heard people clapping for the dialectical image. I would. I do all the time. Woo, snap for it. Images presented or evoked that create conflict in the audience or viewer. These do not create conflict. I'm not showing you any of those as yet. An active engagement with the viewer or the listener, a vexed and anamorphic one. Something at a standstill, right? Stillstand. Such images are productively distracting rather than facilely attractive. There, I'm proving it's true. The dialectical image is also a temporal event, a flash, a spark of a moment. The dialectical image is one that cannot stay too long. A fleeting outburst of asynchronous sound, for example, hard cuts, anamorphism that does not give the viewer time to normalize it as an image, lest it be re-territorialized, reified, and vulnerable to co-opting, like the Surrealist hat or camp at the Met Gala. Just in case you wanted to find some of these. All right, so this is at a site called Wallpaper, and then you know the others. So you can find them more easily. And burn them. Sorry. I don't know where that came from. Paris was so inspiring to Benjamin for its ability to showcase the dialectical image, its uncanny modernity, infinitely mirroring surfaces, its performative dialecticism. And Eugène Atget's photographs were deeply moving. Oh, sorry, okay. So I was going to skip over these slides, but I really want to show them to you. So you might know some of this, right? Kumar and Milamid, who, this is from their US work. I'll show you some images from their conceptualist period in the 1980s when they were still working underground, samizdat, in the Soviet Union. But so I can tell some of you are familiar with this project, where they had a survey and they asked a number of people from various nations, what do you really want to see in a painting? What's a good painting? What does it need? So these are the most wanted paintings, and then they went ahead and painted them, right, according to the survey. So here's the survey. What's your favorite color? Do you prefer paintings with sharp angles or soft curves? Do you like smooth canvases or thick brush strokes? Would you rather look at a painting with figures that are nude or fully clothed? Right? Should the people in the painting be at leisure or working? Should they be indoors or outside? And if the latter, in what kind of landscape? So it's quite arresting that for so many different nations and national tastes, the product is essentially the same. All right? Of course, you're not going to see Washington or whatever in, I don't know, Ireland's most desirable painting. But, you'll see the equivalent and so on. And I couldn't help but put this in. It was really meant for myself, but I'll share it with you. Hitler's watercolors fit perfectly. They fit perfectly in the most wanted category. But I'll show this instead. Some of you might already be familiar with this. So the story behind this, just in case people don't know, is that Mar-a-Lago was sold to the one who should not be named. And the former owners, the husband's name was Davies, and this is his actual family crest. And when Trump moved in, Davies had left, an image of the crest there in Mar-a-Lago. when Trump moved in, he basically stole the crest. He made some changes. And I think you can see the biggest one that he made. Or at least for most people, this is the one that they point out, right? Integritas was taken out. And Trump was put in. And I believe, I could be wrong, you can please let me know if I'm wrong, that this actually is in the Oval Office as well, that this is understood as to be Trump, the Trump family crest. But now it says, instead of just Trump, it says Donald J. Trump. So I could be wrong about that. I don't think I am. Okay. So as I show you some of these, I didn't mean it to spark like that. I don't know what I'm doing with technology. For Benjamin, this dialectical image, when he first talked about it, he actually talked about it first in the 1929 essay on Surrealism, the last snapshot. And the word that he uses in German is Vexe, right? Something that vexes the eye. So what he meant were these images, right? I don't know if any of you knew that the title of this often reproduced image is actually incredibly misogynist, right? So Wechselbild. So Wechselbild were for Benjamin an early notion, an early concept of the dialectical image. Kimbaldo, right, which an artist many surrealists take as their own. Something like this, too, anamorphic. You'll never see it the same again. I could go back, but now you're going to see it. It's got to be a flash, right? And just to show you the possibilities of co-opting, right, bourgeois romanticism. Should we buy points with it? And then Magritte's complication of that, right? Okay, so Paris, I hope that was okay that I went on that tangent with you. Paris was so inspiring to Benjamin for its multiplicity of surfaces, reflective surfaces, including the asphalt of a newly paved road. Right, this was Paris under Haussmannization, under modernization. In Atget, in Eugène Atget's photographs, Benjamin saw Paris politicized, like the scenes of a crime. That's how he put it. Atget's art had evidentiary value for him. They were mobilizations. Benjamin made it clear that Paris itself is a much more potent, energetic dialectical image than surrealist imaginings. Quote, "At the center of this world of things stands the most dreamed of their objects, the city of Paris itself. But only revolt completely exposes its surrealist face, deserted streets in which whistles and shots dictate the outcome. And no face is surrealistic in the same degree as the true face of a city. No picture by Dialectical or Max Ernst can match the sharp elevations of the city's inner strongholds, which one must overrun and occupy in order to master their fate, and in their fate, in the fate of their masses, one's own." So the fact that surrealism can be emblematized at all already shows you its fate. The fact that Dali is a byword, right? The fact that Dali attended the surrealist ball of the Rothschild says to us that surrealism can no longer be that art. But Paris instead makes available to Benjamin the potential of evolutionary and revolutionary energies. And artists can disclose, but only in rupture, the enslaved and enslaving objects of Kitschwelt, of a kitsch world. In Paris, one is reflected everywhere, from shiny asphalt roads to the vitrines of shop windows to cafes filled with mirrors, These gleam with dialectical possibilities. The dialectical image surges, pushes us to think outside of the hegemonic, quote, thus as an image flashing in the now of recognizability, that of what has been is to be held fast. The rescue that is accomplished in this way, and only in this way, can only ever be gained as a result of the perception of what is irretrievably losing itself, constantly losing itself. If we think of Benjamin as concerned in the main with the mode of anticipation rather than futurity, rather than the teleological, and for those of you who are studying, sorry, I'll go back, or have studied on the concept of history, you'll understand what I'm talking about. You'll be aware of the Angelus Novus by Paul Klee, and an emphasis not on mythologizing, but on mythopoesis. So I hope everyone knows that Benjamin owned a print of Paul Klee's Angelus Novus, and when he was writing the Arcades project and on the concept of history, he was looking right at it. He wasn't thinking about it somewhere abstract and in the distance, or rather it was looking at him. So if anticipation rather than futurity, then anticipation also rather than hope is the most controversial part of what I'm saying, I think. The Arcades project is a work with which Benjamin was preoccupied for over 13 years and was rumored to be in the briefcase he carried with him to the Spanish border, where he ultimately committed suicide, believing that he would not be able to immigrate to the US, believing the border was closing. The next day it opened again. He describes the project of the Arcades to his friend Adorno. Quote, it opens with Aragon, the Paysan de Paris, evenings lying in bed. I could never read more than 2 to 3 pages by him because my heart started to pound so hard that I had to put the book down. Most students of Benjamin acknowledge the novel as instrumental for the Arcades project, but I wonder how many have read it. Aragon's novel is fascinating because of its form. It's dialectique, pace Aragon. It explodes the very idea of what a novel is. Paris Peasant is written in manifold modes. It must have created a headache for the printing press, those who had to man it, because it had varied font sizes and the inclusion of figures. The Peasant de Paris is a work that today stands in sharp contrast, though, to what is commonly perceived as surrealist. That is, a movement that takes its iconic signified or even reified character from Salvador Dali. The true image of the past flits by, says Thesis 5. The past can be seized only as an image that flashes up at the moment of its recognizability and is never seen again. The truth will not run away from us. This statement by Gottfried Keller indicates exactly that point in historicism's image of history, where the image is pierced by historical materialism. That's not good for Benjamin. He's critiquing what it is that Keller is saying. What he is saying is in the anticipatory mode, and what Keller is saying is in a hope fulfillment mode, I'm arguing. For Benjamin, taking full advantage of the grammatical gender of nouns, Surrealism was born of the montage. The father of Surrealism was Dada. It still works in English. Its mother was an arcade. But it is not only surrealism and also not calcified surrealism that offers us dialectical anxiety. What art can awaken in us is historically conscious, which is to say, politically aware. To give a sense of what that art is today, an art that compels us to resist, to see social and architectonic, or structural and object-oriented things have become impoverished, have been emptied and vacated of spirit, I'm offering the work of Komar Melamed. Fair game, right? Stalin, but also George Washington. This is the Yalta Conference, according to Komar Melamed. And I'm also offering the work of Jindřich Štýrský, Czech surrealist. And I'm even offering The Planet of the Apes, which startled me. I mean, I was 2 years old. I didn't see it when it came out in the theaters, but when I saw it, I was forever more scarred than the 2 hotels in Exeter. And I'm offering here the work of Jonathan Hartfield, or Helmut Herzfeld. Hooray, the butter's all gone, which is a parody of a Nazi propaganda poster. So since Die Butter ist alle, we have to eat steel and, Jeremy said I would get a good reception about this. Okay. So the work of John Hartfield from the height of World War II, subverting the propaganda of the Third Reich, to the reuse of the language of Hartfield in 2025. The intertext, though, I'm arguing, is not merely a quotation of a text. It doesn't show the scantiness of creativity or originality. Instead, in its repetition, it shows all of the accrual of wisdom, of all the text and all the urgent sparks that came before, as personally political, but also publicly so. I hope everyone sees what I'm showing here. And I'm ending, don't worry, I'm ending now. David Černý is one of my favorite artists, Czech artists again. So in the late 1980s, when Czechoslovakia was still Czechoslovakia and also still a communist satellite, this tank, represented here, right, was one of the tanks that liberated Prague in World War II, right, so in 1945, and then they just never left. So a Soviet tank, memorialized. In the 1980s, David Černý and his art school friends, so hey, you can all do this, painted at around 3 a.m., right, 3:30 a.m., they went and painted the tank pink, or the pank tink, dialectical image. And then it would be painted over again the next day, right, to this color again. And then they do it again. They got arrested once, they had to spend some time in jail, they got out, they did it again. And then the Velvet Revolution of 1989. That, however, did not stop David Černý from creating numerous artworks and installations that posited themselves dialectically against whoever was in power. And I'm going to end now on one of my favorite pieces of his. I'm hoping to take my kid, who is an SVA Honors student, and let me point her out so that she's thoroughly embarrassed and mortified to see. So this is a Černý piece that I think is also, in its anamorphosis, right, as a Czech installation, right, artist, I think that David Černý is again saying, you can't make this out. On its first encounter, you can't be sure what it is. And it stirs things in you that you're not quite sure what to do with. That's the moment of resistance. And then I'll end on Kafka, because how could I not? And I think that this is what Benjamin means by love without hope. And now I get a little preachy. Benjamin, to me, is not a pessimist. He's a realist with an urgent agenda. He's warning us. He warned us, and we should have listened. We must listen, especially today, now at whatever time it is, right now. Love without hope, to me, is a summons to discard hope. Romantic, fetishistic, ultimately deleterious. Then and only then will one come to terms with the urgency of now, of destruction, of the earth, of its flora and fauna, of humanity, of the ethics of kindness. Love cannot be foolish, like Breton urged, l'amour fou. Why? Because such love is outside of one's will. Hope is here not a thing with feathers, or if it is, it's a dress with 1,000 feathers, or even better, a boulder with tiny little feathers. It is hope that keeps us asleep, or sleepwalking, passive, lacking any sense of urgency to action. Hoping requires complacency. It is the fantasy that guarantees our lack of participation and dissidence. And this is not to say that Benjamin's love is cynical or conditioned. It's nothing like Jacques Lacan's definition of love, which is giving something which one does not have to someone who does not want it. As reasonable as that may sound to many of you. A formulation, though, that relies on Lacan's idea about the onanism of desire. Instead, to love without hope is deeply responsible. If we wrest love from its romanticism, I know, gosh, it's Valentine's Day is coming up. What am I doing? That is, wresting it from hope, then love comes to no longer be in opposition to duty. Did Benjamin love surrealism without hope? I believe he did. And the only answer to why do you love me would not be a taxonomy of favorite things, like what constitutes surrealist headgear or a camp outfit. It would be found in the perfectly honest answer to when someone asks you, do you love me? I don't know why I love you, but I do. Is it? That's fantastic. That's it. So I know you had to slog through that with me, but if there are any questions, and that first slide, let's see if I can get back to it. The first slide originally read, please feel fee, right? Or please feel fee to email. There's no fee involved. Don't worry. I'm not, yeah.
Yeah, we have a little time for Q&A. So.
Hi, thank you so much for that talk. I feel like I have a ton to read now. And I also appreciate the ending remarks and the emphasis on will and action, and possibility for action, as well as love that does not eschew to be.
Exactly, yeah.
And I also appreciate your deep love. I would like to ask a question. You know, one can miss so much in these talks. And I think you said Benjamin was terrified of Kitsch, and I was surprised by this. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about whether, and if so, how, Benjamin treats Kitsch dialectically. I mean, Kitsch is more often associated with the popular, with perhaps something perceived as lower.
Right, where there's a bifurcation between low art and high art and so on, or popular culture as opposed to high culture. So Kitsch is not dialectical at all for Benjamin. Benjamin does not talk so much about kitsch, or doesn't use the word kitsch in later work, right? But it's a concern for him in the 1920s, and this is also when it was a concern, not just for Hermann Bloch, but also Robert Musil, right? Man Without Qualities, so many other writers and thinkers of the time, that kitsch only borrows. It doesn't create. Kitsch is always false. It's always pretentious. So kitsch can be high culture, or what is deemed to be high culture. In fact, deeming something to be high culture is kitschy. That's how I would answer that. That kitsch can never, right? You can tell when something's kitsch because there's no dialectical body to it. And I think I kind of betrayed myself, but I think that that's the discourse that's going on right now. It's basically we're living in a kitsch world. And it's the kind of force that stops conversation instead of agitates it. It's also, and I should also say that to just say that someone's a fascist is not enough, right? That kind of stopgap motion. I mean, Zizek talked about that quite a long time ago, that it doesn't start a conversation. It's not dialectical to just go, you're a fascist, and leave the room. It's very hard, though, to talk to a kitschmensch. I'm going to say something bad. I'm going to stop myself. I need to censor myself. But yeah, kitsch is just not, it doesn't participate dialectically at all. Yeah. And in fact, I think the Kundera helps me to understand this as well. And it's the section in The Unbearable Lightness of Being called Stalin's Son. That it's the story of, Stalin's son was actually in a Nazi camp. And he tried to escape, and he caught himself on the barbed wire, and he shit himself. And he was returned to live with the English POWs, the British POWs, and they relentlessly made fun of him, not because he was Stalin's son, but because he shit himself, because he was incontinent. So, you know, Kundera is not saying, let's all shit. Maybe he is. But that kind of degradation, right, that denial of shit, that it's something that has to be covered up, that we cover our toilets, right, that we make of the bathroom some kind of ocean spa, refuge. We're curtaining ourselves off from the fact that we shit. So I think Kundera's idea of the double tier, that there's nothing wrong with seeing children playing on the grass and being happy. What's wrong is in the next moment when one thinks, and Boch says this as well, says, isn't it beautiful that I think that's beautiful? Aren't I great for thinking that's great? Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, so also thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
You connected in your lecture the 72 Surrealist Hall run by the Rothschilds and the 2019 Met Gala. Would you also put the 1903 costume ball at the Winter Palace into a similar category?
Yeah, that's very good.
Considering the Romanov
Yeah.
dynasties.
Yeah, I would. I mean, Benjamin and other thinkers they conceive of kitsch as something modern. But where that point in modernity is, for Hermann Boch, it goes back to the Protestant Revolution, when Boch says that suddenly, you know, having sex with someone was not just between you and the person you were having sex with, but God was there too, watching and saying, yes, I approve of this. And that's when, right? So where that modernity is placed, I mean, the contest over, you know, when did modernity start? Did it even start, right? Are we still anticipating it? I think under the aegis that I'm working with, yes, that ball at the Winter Palace would also be kitsch. I mean, balls are kitsch. It's not so much that there's something that inheres in, I don't know, I can't find anything kitschy at SVA. But it doesn't inhere, right, in an object. It inheres in the way that you relate to the object. So, yeah, you can see there's a lot of discourses that you could participate in, and you could see that there's a great deal of a denial of complication. There's a flattening of all things. There's, or even if we want to bring Foucault into this, categorization at the dawn of classification, encyclopedization, categorization. You also have, an attempt for human beings to dominate, right? Dominate the things around them. There's a statue of Linnaeus who came up with the binomial taxonomy outside of my office. Not right there, but I'm on the 4th floor and I can see him down there. And when there were protests, pro-Palestinian protests, people had written on the Linnaeus, they'd graffitied on the Linnaeus statue. And I thought, that's fantastic, because they have no idea who Linnaeus is. But it works. And so for a little while, Linnaeus was a dialectical image for me. Yes.
I have a question. One thing I thought about is so we're in for a second Trump period, which is obviously, I think, the context of your talk. And the first Trump period produced, I think, a lot of kitschy response. Both the kitsch from Trump himself, but also what we might call resistance kitsch.
Yeah.
And I do think thinking through your categories, there is a sense of the kind of implicit in the gesture of resistance was often a aren't I so good to
Exactly.
resist?
Yeah.
And so I just wonder, I mean, clearly that was and another speaker we've had in the past, Ben Davis, has a really good piece on this. Why in 2020 why liberals should not, or I think why artists should not be congratulating themselves about
Right. Like virtue signaling as well and things like
Yeah.
that. But also, right. I know what you're saying.
What kind of culture is adequate to the object? I mean, what kind of politics, but also what kind of culture?
I think it just has to be in flux all the time. It can't solidify, right? It can't gel itself under a rubric. It can't say, we all believe in this and then break off because one person doesn't believe in that. So they go and make their own, little sect, and then nothing happens when that not happening happens. I think that the fact that you're all still sitting here, and me too, instead of going out and doing something, and I don't know what that something is. And up until very recently, and maybe I've not watched the news because my sister's household is a Trump household. It's so hard. Ooh, hold on. That it took the Democratic side so long to start talking, even to start talking. It's too late. If you start to think everything's too late already, that's the kind of resistance. It's already too late. It's not, let's hope that, in 2 years things will settle down. Or let's hope that, some better minds come and work this out. The logic of, or the illogic of hope can't work. My mother, who passed away, 5 years ago now? Way back when Obama was running, and he was running on, what was his Hope and Change. And she's like, what does that, she's not a native speaker of English. She's like, what does that mean? And I'm like, you're right. You're right. I'm not sure what that means. It doesn't really mean anything. So I think that first we have to say it's already too late, right? It's not, if this happens one more time, then we'll do something. It's past time. And that fills me with a lot of rage. But it's hard to sustain, right? You have to sustain a kind of what Benjamin would call, right, a messianic pessimism. that the Messiah is already here. We're not still waiting, right? And Kafka wasn't saying that as hopeful, right? Kafka also said, when he was asked if there is hope, he said, oh, hope, you mean for us? No, but there's plenty for God. So I think, but like taking oneself out of the logic of hope is very difficult. It seeps in everywhere, right? It's everywhere also in media, like tomorrow, right? Even the Annie song. I love you tomorrow, you're only a day, or you're always a day away. Yeah, exactly. You think everything's gonna be better tomorrow. Tomorrow's gone. Yeah. Sorry, that was so depressing. Let's all be enraged. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Maybe we have time for one or two more.
I just want to ask a quick question. If you could elaborate a bit on where you see the Arcades project in this kind of worldview picture, because so much of the Arcades project, which I feel like doesn't get as much attention, is kind of just wading through this dreamlike space of, Baudelaire's or Paris.
Yeah.
And I'm curious kind of where you situate that dreaminess
Yes.
in
Okay.
this whole thing. And then also real quick,
Good question.
First Block and Hope and Utopia, I feel like there's some other kind of like Frankfurt School.
There
that
is.
kind of available.
There is. This is also why, Benjamin was not, he was sort of reluctantly embraced by the Frankfurt School. But they didn't understand him. Adorno, Horkheimer, Marcuse, they're like, what is this guy doing? So yeah, there is an even, all the other Frankfurt schoolers, there is a certain notion of, of a tomorrow. In the Arcades project, I didn't mean to point at you. In the Arcades project, I think, first of all, I think it's complete. I don't think it's an unfinished work. And I know I'm in the minority when I say that. I think it's meant to be piecemeal, and I think it's meant to be, they're called convolutes, right? Each section is called a convolute. It's meant to be convoluted. I think the whole thing is presented as a dialectical image, in fact. So that when Baudelaire is talked about, and he's talked about a lot, Baudelaire is brought up as the father of modernity, right? But I don't think that what we're meant to see in Baudelaire is the dreaminess, right? I think that Baudelaire is juxtaposed. Like, that's not even a good enough word, right? Baudelaire is suffused with sort of the violence then of I don't know, tearing homes down in along the Seine, right? Or the romanticism of the death mask of that girl, considered beautiful in that, right? And kept in that moment. You know what I'm talking about, right? So there's a young woman who committed suicide in the Seine, many did. But even her suicide was so romanticized, right? And her death mask was like a bestseller. So it was reproduced and sold, and people put it up in their homes, right? So kitsch. That I think Benjamin presents that in Arcades in order to juxtapose it or to suffuse it with other moments that then clash. Yeah. So the admiration he has for Baudelaire is also tinged with this, this is a bourgeois poet. How do we wrest, W-R-E-S-T, Baudelaire from that moment in history to right now? Yeah. Sorry, I feel like that was insufficient, but I love the Arcades project so much. I'm going to retire next year. That's okay, the poster, thank you. I'm not sure what that means. Like, yeah, go away. Stop doing this. I hope you're saying, hey, congratulations. Yeah, it's an early retirement. Yeah, I mean, I'm only 40, so. And, yeah. Jeremy's like 18 or something, yeah. So, sort of as an FU to the university, I'm going to teach a course on shit and a course on the Arcades project. So, and I'm going to limit enrollment to 5. Because what are they gonna do? You're fired, right? I have tenure, and you already have heard of my retirement plans. So. Thank you for that question. Hey, yeah, you can all email for me for a fee. I mean, feel free. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much.